Morning, Chris. How you doing this morning?
Good morning, Ron. Doing great. How about yourself?
It's Webinar Thursday. I love it. So it's all good. Happy day. Got a great topic today for you. I'll surprise you with this one. We're going to flip from HIPAA. We're going to go over to Payment Hub and we're going to talk about payments. And today we're going to talk about helping our clients make more money. Actually,
Love it.
instead of making more money, lose less money, right? So
Yeah.
y'all remember back in the day, a few years ago, if I went to buy gas, if I paid by cash, I got a 4 cent a gallon discount. But if I paid by credit card, I had to pay 4 cents a gallon more, right? I think at least those of age are going to remember that anyway. Uh, that was because they were trying to capture what we call that surcharge that was charged them by the credit card companies for using a credit card, right? If you used a debit card, there's no surcharge. So there was no 4 cent a gallon upcharge. But if you used a credit card, there was a 4 cent a gallon upcharge, right? Well, that's the same thing that happens today with all our clients today that take online payments via credit card. They are getting charged the processing rate from the credit card company. Those average anywhere from, let's say, 2 to 4 cents from what we're seeing usually per dollar, right? And so when it comes to the effective rate, they usually on average end somewhere between that 2.5 to 3.75%. But let's call it 2 to 4%. So there's some surcharge that's collected and charged every month for the right and the ability to accept credit card payments. So today, what we're talking about is how do we push that payment onto the client? How do we give the client the option to say, hey, if you pay by ACH or if you pay by debit card, I'm not going to surcharge you. But if you pay by credit card, you're going to pay the extra 3%. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. 45 of the 50 states in the United States of America allow surcharge collection and are supported by many of the processors we work with. So let me turn it over to you and let you kind of talk briefly about that. And then let's go ahead and dive right in.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of different ways to do this. And probably the most important thing, and I'm sure you'll talk about this too, Ron, is the messaging and the transparency to the end customer. And
Right.
there's a lot of legality around this that you'll want to really pay attention to in particular jurisdictions. So the first thing is there needs to be some concept of dealing with the handful of jurisdictions that don't allow this and consistent awareness about when those rules change so that you're in compliance. And then the second thing is just making it very obvious to the end user what their options are. So if you can present them with options to not have that surcharge charged to them by paying with a different form of payment, that's going to help with customer sat. A lot of times people prefer to just go ahead and pay the surcharge. They know there's a surcharge. I think most folks have seen what this looks like. I'm sure we can show some nice examples on the screen here so you can
Yeah.
see just visually, what those will look like. And that's probably the most important thing I can say here is making sure to manage the expectations of the customer and that they're aware of what's going on wherever applicable. Now, in some particular scenarios, it may not be applicable. And ultimately, you're going to want to go through this with your CPA and possibly legal counsel at some level. But what we can say is that there are standards that, again, we're showing some of these examples on the screen that work really, really well. And they're examples that customers are expecting and that they're used to. And so I think that's really the sort of big takeaway. Then on the technology side, and this is probably what you were looking for me to speak to most, Ron, is the fact of the matter is different payment processors and payment gateways handle this differently.
Right.
And I would say there's sort of nuance to this with them and what they can and can't do. So most payment processors and payment gateways, they do handle this without major issue. And Clarity as a partner helps our clients. So if you are interested in understanding this and getting into the weeds, we help our clients partner up with payment processors and payment gateways that fit their specific business model. Different industries have really specialized solutions for ERPs, for example, or other software that applies to their niche or their business. In a similar vein, a lot of the payment processors have specialized in particular industries and the risk associated with those industries, as well as optimizing the fees and the cost schedule. And so you're going to want to ideally work with someone who can help you find those optimized payment processors that are not only looking at the overall fees and costs, but also how the surcharging would work for your business that's going to work best long term. In addition to that, we also work with partners that can help with some of the back office accounting and dealing with some of the interaction with your systems. In addition to just natively doing that within our application. So you really want someone who's going to handle this within your accounting as well, wherever possible. Having to have an additional line on an invoice as a line item or a transaction item, ledger entry. These are things that are pretty common for each of the orders. Possibly, some of the sort of reconciliation that's going to occur with your bank and your payment processor. We're going to need to make sure all of these small pennies and dimes worth of cost get accumulated into the right line items within your general ledger and your accounting system as well. So there's a lot of nuance to it that if you select the right partner, they're going to just make this very turnkey and very seamless. And so you're going to want to consider someone who's done this before, right, Ron?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, a few different things. I mean, we've partnered with many different providers, like Chris said, so that we can get processing solutions for any of our clients, whether they're in high risk. I've got a couple that we're working with right now that are high risk only because they sell firearms, right? And just automatically the processing companies put those in a high risk, even though the clients pay by credit card. They're hardly ever late and there's really no risk to getting the payment. That is a classification of high risk for them. Hazmat and some of the others, right? And credit card companies still won't take cannabis companies, right? That's a cash business. So there's a lot of different nuances to the industries that Chris is talking about. We partner with quite a few companies, some of the ones that do surcharge collection, and I'll talk about how it works. Nuve, Interpayments, Heartland, right? Those are just some that we're partners with that collect and can do surcharge collection. Again, Chris mentioned we'll show a couple screenshots. There are different ways that we do it, even with our solution. We've got our Clarity e-commerce solution, which can do surcharge collection. And sometimes it's just calculate fee, or it just adds it in there and shows the fee collected. And down at the bottom has a nice little memo that says, a fee was collected due to credit card charge. Other times in our payment solution, we'll actually have the button come up and say calculate surcharge. So they physically have to hit the button and go, wait a minute, there's a surcharge on this card. And so, as Chris mentioned early on, the messaging is very, very clear. And it's almost like you're not in their face where you're making them click a terms and use button. Yes, I understand I'm going to be charged that extra $3.50 for using this ATM, right? We're all used to that. That's a surcharge collection for using an ATM, not from my bank, right? We're used to that kind of stuff. But it literally comes up, it adds it in there. It shows them the total, and I'll show this on the screen here. It shows me the total of my invoice. Then I hit calculate surcharge. It shows me what fee is going to be collected as the surcharge. And then, as Chris was stating, one of the things that we do, because we're an integration vendor or technology specialist, we can then generate that additional ledger entry Chris is talking about, either as a separate invoice, as a credit memo, as an attachment to an existing invoice. So the accounting team can then account for those surcharges collected, which is very important when it comes to accounting. So if you want to see that, make sure to reach out. I'll do a demo, show it to you live, show it in action, integrated with an ERP, and show you exactly how that works and how our solution can actually create. If your solution won't allow for us to add it as a credit memo to an existing invoice, where we will create a subsequent invoice that will be tagged with a notation that surcharge collected on invoice 1234, right? And it makes it very clear. So let's talk briefly, Chris, from a technical perspective, and I'll let you talk more around the architecture. I'm going to talk at the high level and let you dive in technically, if you will. So at the high level, the way we do this, we want to automate it, right? We don't want them to go in and put in a debit card and accidentally charge them a surcharge. We can't do that, right? If they pick the debit card, they don't even know the surcharge doesn't show up. They just go through and pay. If they pick ACH, it just goes through and pay. There is nothing even on the screen that disrupts them. They don't know anything about a surcharge. It's only if they pick a credit card. Well, how do we even know that? Well, what happens on the back end, and this is kind of, and I'm going to do it the high end, and then Chris will talk about it, is we'll take the bin of the card, which identifies the type of card it is. We send that up to the provider. the provider looks that card up and does a couple of different things. One, what type of card is this? Is this a surchargeable card? If it's a debit card, it comes back and says no. If it's a credit card and it says yes, it's surchargeable, then the second step it goes and checks, okay, are we in a region that allows for surcharge collection? Are we in one of the 45 states that allows this? If so, then it can come back and in real time send us the rate of surcharge we're supposed to collect. Now, sometimes technically the client's doing that at a flat rate. Sometimes the processor's deciding what that surcharge rate is based on the contract they have with their provider. So once we send it up and they come back and say, yes, it's surchargeable. Yes, it's in a state that you can surcharge. The rate is 2.79%. And then we go, great, your surcharge is, 2.79%, 27.90 on $1,000 invoice, right? And we add it right there on the screen. Your total is, click, and they accept the payment, right? So from a high level, that's kind of how it works. So Chris, again, since this is more of a technical solution on the back end, I'm going to let you dive in a little more technically and add any color you want. And then I think for Surcharge, that about wraps it up, right? So from my perspective, if you guys want to see it in action, I'd love you to reach out, schedule a demo with me, and I'd love to walk you through it. So Chris, let's turn it over to you to talk technically about the solution.
Absolutely. And I'll try to keep it pretty high level for folks, just to note that there are, like you said, Ron, there are different ways to architect this so that it, in general, is very modular for your business. One of the things that I would sort of just generally focus your attention on is where are you going with your business over the next 3 to 5 years? And does the sort of architecture, the foundation of your surcharging solution and your overall payment processing solution accommodate where you're headed in the long term? If it doesn't, it's okay, but you should at least be aware of that. If you are going to work with a partner and your intent is for there to be, long-term growth with the solution, then you're going to want to think about the ability to have sort of different modalities for attaching to that surcharging solution. Example would be natively inside of my ERP or accounting solution, I want internal team members to be able to process payments and have that surcharging option right there. Maybe some kind of prompt for them. So when they're talking with customers, they can properly notify the customer, through this internal messaging. In a similar vein, I might want a ticketing system, to have the ability to link to payments and process those payments. I may have a kiosk type of model for my business or a mobile application, and the list goes on. And so a lot of our clients will sort of look at the next 12 to 18 months. I would encourage you to at least look at the next 3 to 5 years as well. Not necessarily to make the full investment to complete all of the functionality for 3 to 5 years out, but at least to be aware of it. Right. And so that's what I would speak to from a high level perspective when you're looking at your surcharge solution. Is it going to scale? The other thing that I would say is a lot of times it becomes very logistically non-trivial to deal with all of the different jurisdictions and the taxes and the accounting, like you mentioned, Ron. So I would just encourage folks, really go through with a qualified partner and just talk with them about what your business model entails, some of the different scenarios, and try to think about edge cases. A simple example would be that someone requests a partial refund on a order. So maybe they have 2 items that they need a refund on. And you've got to refund that surcharge fee. How are you going to deal with that? Maybe there's a scenario where you're trying to decide how shipping costs are handled with surcharging, and the list goes on and on and on. And so there are just nuances that we encourage you to get with a professional team that's done this before. Clarity is happy to be that team for you. Regardless, we just encourage you to work with a team that has experience doing this and can help you look ahead 3 to 5 years from a technology perspective. But with that said, we certainly appreciate the opportunity to share this detail with you. And we're happy to have a more detailed, specific discussion that applies to your business offline if you would like to reach out to us. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Ron, to wrap us up.
Yeah. So again, thanks to the audience today. Really appreciate you joining us. Would love if you're not already subscribed to subscribe and follow the channel. Chris and I try to get these webinars out every week. We want to keep this kind of information coming to you across different things like e-commerce and HIPAA and marketplace. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, would love to see it in the comments. Hope to see you soon in the next webinar. Bye for now.
Bye for now.